All right, we are live all over the place. One thing I did want to mention is that, we see we're kind of all over the Panhandle here. We want to let you know that there is a IFAS Extension office in all 67 counties of Florida. And so if you have further questions after today, you can of course reach out to the panelists, but you can also contact your local county extension office. And so I believe we'll be sharing a link where you can find a map and get a hold of your local extension office. It's now 1 o'clock, so panelists and other agents, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Tanzig again. I'm the Horticulture Extension Agent in Leon County. And we have with us some panelists that they will introduce themselves in a little bit. I did want to recognize some of the agents in the background that are helping out. So we have Matt Lawler from Santa Rosa County. He's doing the Zoom, all the Zoom work in the background. We have Matt Orwatt from Washington County. He's there doing the Facebook side of things. So thank you, Matt and Matt. And Daniel Leonard is usually here doing this part that I'm doing right now, but Daniel is in some very important training, so he couldn't be here. So I hope Daniel's enjoying the training, and I'm glad he made this pretty straightforward for him. So now to our panelists, we'll introduce our 3 panelists. We have 3 butterfly gardening panel experts here to help you today. We'll start from west to east. So Beth, if you could please introduce yourself.
Hi, glad to be here with you. I'm Beth Bowles over in the Pensacola area in Escambia County, and excited for all things butterfly today.
And Mary.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Salinas, and I'm the residential horticulture agent here in Santa Rosa County. And I also, one of my programs is the Panhandle Butterfly House. That was there in Navarre for 21 years, and maybe some of you are familiar with that. And it's now moving to Milton. So look for that to come up maybe next year, be available.
Great, that sounds exciting, Mary. And next up is Julie McConnell in Bay County.
Hi, I'm Julie McConnell. I'm in Bay County, and I'm a horticulture agent here, handle commercial, residential, and master gardener volunteers.
And shout out to Julie. She's also the Facebook Live person in the background as well. So thank you, Julie, for handling that. I did, before we get started, I want to mention there is a survey that we would like you to fill out following the program here to let us know if you learned anything, give us some feedback. I think both of the Matts are going to post that. You can click on it now and then answer it later, and we will try to also post that link at the end. And a reminder, we are doing this every 2 weeks. And so in another 2 weeks, the topic is prepping for the fall vegetable garden. So that sounds really nice right now because it's hot as blazes outside, but it's nice to know that soon it will be fall and there will be cool, crisp mornings where we can enjoy gardening yet again. So with that, I am going to start the question. So the Zoom participants, when they registered, provided us with some questions, and we have a lot of questions. So I tried to break these down into various categories. So we're going to start off with the, kind of the focus of our obsession here today with the butterflies. So let's start with some butterfly questions first. So Beth, how many butterflies do we have in Florida?
How many in Florida? A lot of butterflies do we have in Florida. Realize it's a big state, so there's going to be a lot here in our tropical climate. Even up here in North Florida, we have quite a few. But really, in Florida, there's about 180 documented butterflies. There could be some more that we find in the future. We hope so, for certain. Not as many of those are outsiders as you would think. We have quite a few native species, which is always good. And then some of the tropical ones that come up. You may not see all these in your landscape, but you'll be surprised. There are so many more there than you really see. So hopefully we'll hit on some of those under-recognized butterflies today too.
Yeah, Florida's a pretty amazing state where you know, that long state latitude wise, right? We get lots of plants, lots of animals, lots of butterflies. So zooming in a little closer, Julie, what do you think are, if you want to pick one of the most common or maybe a couple of the most common butterflies that people are likely to see here in Florida Panhandle?
Sure. I think really it just depends on what your environment is. So we have some butterflies that prefer open fields, some that like wood lines, some that are more active in swampy areas. But for me, the one that I see a lot in Bay County is the Gulf fritillary, and also several swallowtails are very active.
Okay. So, you know, we all enjoy seeing butterflies flutter around in the yard. What are some that might be going after our friendly butterflies, Mary?
Well, like Julie said, there's so many different butterflies and they're not evenly distributed. You'll find them in different areas. Some of the most common that I see around are the giant swallowtail. Most people with any kind of citrus will see them. They'll see their little ugly little caterpillars on their citrus trees. Black swallowtails are always around. Of course, monarchs. We see the monarchs coming in the spring, returning from their migration, and then sporadically during the warm season, and then of course in the fall when they all come down and come through here and migrate to Mexico.
And as far as predators, what do you got? What are some of the more common butterfly predators?
Yes, you know, there are a lot of other animals that feed on butterflies. And I know it's hard for butterfly enthusiasts to watch their caterpillars and their eggs and the adults even, you know, get eaten. But that's part of our natural ecosystem. That's part of their function. So they do provide food for other predators like ladybugs and assassin bugs, wasps. And even birds. Birds rely on caterpillars to feed their young. They'll feed their young hundreds of little caterpillars. They're an ideal food for our songbirds. So, you know, just keep in mind that not all the caterpillars are going to survive, but hopefully they'll go to good use.
That's right. And yes, there was a question about if we have pictures of all these butterflies, and Matt posted a link there that has lots of pictures. And just another link you might want to share, Matt, is the Museum of the Butterfly House, the Museum of Natural History's butterfly group out of Gainesville's got a lot of good handouts with lots of pictures. We always give them out when we have public events when there's not coronavirus going on. Beth, so question for you. Have you noticed recently butterflies seeming to come a little later this year than in previous years? And specifically the person was asking in relation to the Gulf fritillaries.
Right, every year is going to be different for butterflies. Remember, they're really waiting and taking those cues to have something to eat. And so it may not always be the same every single season. So in our state is very different too, or coastal areas are different. So where some plants may overwinter, others may freeze back. And that may delay some butterfly activity until that food source is there. This spring, we were really dry throughout the month of April, so maybe plants were slower to come back, and that may delay some of those butterflies because remember, they're going to take that cue from both the sight and the scent of that host plant. And so one thing just to think about is just what our season brings, and it may not always be the same. So hopefully it's not that they're gone for some reason, it's just that they may be delayed in some seasons where there are other years they're early.
Right, and this year we didn't get super cold, but we did have a kind of a long, drawn out, cooler spring maybe. So, all right, Julie, couple questions regarding folks are either seeing butterfly, they're seeing the caterpillars, but they're not seeing chrysalises anywhere. some folks are seeing the butterflies, but they're not really seeing where they're laying the eggs, and they're not seeing the caterpillar. So do you want to talk about what folks might be, what they're seeing in their garden and why they aren't seeing the butterflies or why they aren't seeing the caterpillar? You got some magic answer for us.
Sure. So
Science-based answer for us.
when we see butterflies come and visit plants for nectar, and they'll come to a lot of different types of flowers, different colors, different sizes, types. And that's really easy to do as far as attracting them. The key to having them lay eggs, in which of course your caterpillars are coming from the eggs because that's the butterfly larvae, is you have to have host plants. And most of our butterflies are rather specific on what type of host their caterpillars can eat. And so if you know you want to attract a certain type of butterfly, then you would want to make sure that you provide the host plant for them. And a lot of times you can watch and see them lay eggs. And if they'll kind of stop at a plant, especially if it's one that they keep coming back to where there aren't any flowers that they're visiting, it can be kind of obvious that that might be what they're doing. And you can really see the abdomen of the butterfly just kind of curve down in a hook shape and stop for a second, and then the butterfly will fly away, come back, do it again over and over and over again. And then if you go and look, you can usually see an egg. A lot of them tend to lay just one egg, although different species do different things. So finding the eggs again later on might be hard. There are going to be predators that may eat those eggs. As the caterpillars hatch out, of course, they're very, very small. Usually you can't see the markings that you might identify when you're looking at brochures because they tend to develop more color as they get larger. So they can be hard to see. Once you see them, again, they're somebody's food. So you can definitely lose some to predators. If you do happen to see them and you're not having birds or lizards or other insects come in and they form a chrysalis, a lot of them are not going to do it on the host plant where they were feeding. They will go and hide, and they will usually look for something that their chrysalis is going to camouflage in, because at that point in time, they have no defense against any type of predator. So they want to hide out. They want to be able to come out of that chrysalis safely. And even that is a process, and once the butterfly comes out, it's got to kind of inflate its wings and dry out and be ready to fly away so it can escape. So they tend to, they have survival in mind, not our viewing pleasure. So they're probably hiding if they made it that far.
All right, thank you for that, Julie. Yeah, there was sometimes those chrysalises will show up in some weird places, even the bottom of a deck railing or in the little parts of your siding on your house. Okay, let's see. So Beth, here's an interesting question. I'm curious to hear what you got to say about this one. What is the best way to provide habitat for butterflies during the dormant seasons?
Yeah, we don't always think in our neck of the woods. It does get cold, maybe not as cold some years as others, but a lot of those flowering plants that Julie mentioned, all those colors that are attracting the butterflies for nectar, a lot of those may be gone for many of the gardeners. So people think, how can I attract them? Well, you have to realize a lot of these butterflies, if we go through warm spells, and we do have some in that kind of dormant season, they may be feeding on some other things you're not aware of. Some of our trees are host plants for those butterflies. Even, something like the Dahoon holly is actually a host plant for one of our butterflies. So depending on how cold we get, you may see a few stragglers in the winter. For many of us, we won't see as many, but think about incorporating other plants into your landscape that are trees and shrubs for some of those warm spells we go through, in addition to some of those just flowering plants that may freeze. That's the key. Have a very diverse landscape.
That's right. A Florida-friendly landscape, right? Let's see. Julie, back to you real quick. Well, let's see how quick. Do all butterflies migrate?
No, they don't all migrate, but more than just the monarchs do. There are several other species that do, the Gulf fritillaries and queens that look similar to the monarchs, common buckeye, some other sulfurs. There's probably about maybe 20, maybe not quite that many that do migrate.
Okay, that was pretty quick. Facebook folks, they got questions on best host plants and native plants, and that is coming right up. So hold up just a moment. And a good Zoom question that we just got. I'm going to go ahead and ask it now just because it's kind of fun and it's related. Do a lot of these principles apply to moths as well as butterflies? So we're talking about encourage, butterfly gardening. Would some of the same things we're doing to encourage butterflies encourage moths to be around? And maybe I'll ask, let's see, Mary, you want to tackle that one, or Mary or Julie?
Sure, I can tackle that one. Yes, and a lot of our moths, even though we don't see them, quite as often because they're generally nocturnal, they also have their host plants that they feed on, and so yes, the protocol would be the same if you want to encourage a particular moth to, like a Luna moth, which are really gorgeous, look up their host plant and plant that. And generally, like the butterflies, they will feed on a variety of nectar plants as well.
But remember, some of those moths, you don't necessarily like what their caterpillars eat. So you may have to be a little more understanding in your landscape. I don't know that people are really trying to encourage the tomato hornworm, although you end up with it anyway.
And some are rather generalist feeders. Some are really, really specific down to one species, just like some of our butterflies are, but there's a lot of them that can cross over and eat a lot of different plants too. So, but if you are encouraging them, if it is a nocturnal moth, which a lot of them are, you may need things that are gonna be blooming at night because some of our flowers close after dusk.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to something Beth mentioned. If you have lots of diversity in your yard, you'll probably, that's the better to attract the more diverse wildlife as well. Okay, moving on from the butterfly to what can we do in our gardens to bring them in? So I'm going to start with you, Mary, and ask, how would a gardener ensure that they have plants for both the larvae and the adult butterflies?
Well, first you may want to take a look around your garden, be out there for a while, your garden, your neighborhood, and see, if you do have butterflies, try to identify them, get them identified so you know what they are. Then you can use some of the resources that we're providing you to find out what larval host plants that they need, and you can integrate those into your garden. You want to, though, be aware that when you put in larval host plants, those caterpillars are going to come and eat up those plants. They're going to decimate them, sometimes stripping all the leaves. So you need to be tolerant of that. You may want to put those plants maybe a little bit in the back of your garden and not put them as a primary focus, so that if they are eaten up, it doesn't look quite so bad. If you don't really have a whole lot of butterflies around, think about what you would like to attract and plant those things. If you would like to see giant swallowtails, plant some citrus, or some black swallowtails, plant some dill and parsley and fennel. And when you plant those host plants, make sure to plant a good number of them, not just one or two, but a good sized patch of them, so that the females will find those plants and that there will be enough food for those caterpillars throughout that particular life cycle.
Great, and go ahead, sorry.
Oh, as for nectar plants, for the butterflies, you need to think about planting a wide variety of flowers. wide variety of colors and shapes and sizes, because different butterflies have different preferences. And as well, plant lots of them, you know, groupings of them so that the butterflies can find them. Those are the basic principles.
And I know that the link that Matt just shared in Zoom, and I think was also shared on Facebook, this butterfly garden design document from IFAS has it's 20 some pages long, I think, with going through each species of butterfly and what their larval host and nectar plants are. So lots of good resources available to help you with that. Beth, next question is for you. So we've now have, Mary's helped us figure out what plants we're going to choose. Would you suggest dedicating an entire section to a butterfly garden, or kind of spreading them out through your whole landscape?
The entire landscape.
Just cover
The
it.
entire thing should be for butterflies and pollinators and wildlife. If you've heard me talk before, I'm all for wildlife. I'm very tolerant. So you really want to think about incorporating all that variety, because it's like Mary said, there are lots of flowers and lots of diverse flowers, but like we've kind of hinted at before, there are a lot of plants that are not necessarily your typical thoughts for butterfly plants that are their host plant. There's a lot of weeds as well. You may not realize this, but some of our great winter weeds like cudweed and toadflax are host to butterflies. And so incorporating some of those, so it really takes kind of your overall landscape and kind of becomes your job to think about when you're buying a new tree or shrub, is it a host? Or if you have a woodland area, maybe leaving a black cherry there as a host for a butterfly. But, if you're working with a school, if you're working with your community center or with a church, that's where you may have a smaller type dedicated area that is called a butterfly garden. But for the homeowner, you want to really think about those large groupings of flowers, of groupings of host plants, but lots of variety. So that really is your whole landscape.
Fantastic. So once we, plant the right species, well, this next one's more about how do we take care of those plants, and kind of asking us, I think, which are our favorites. So each panelist, do you want to pick one of your favorite butterfly attracting plants and tell us how maybe easy it is, or any special things to do to keep it looking good? And we'll start with Beth. We'll go from west to east again.
So my favorite butterfly host plant or nectar plant, which one?
Attractor, either one.
Either one. Okay. Well, my absolute favorite butterfly host plant is a wildflower called false foxglove. It's about 4 feet tall. You do find it in kind of more of those open areas. It is absolutely gorgeous, with kind of a tubular purple pink flower, and it's host to the buckeye butterfly. So buckeyes usually come on early. The false foxglove may not be there, so it's on other plants. But in the fall and late summer, this is a beautiful little wildflower type plant that even could work in our landscapes to give us that kind of natural look to it. And that's probably my favorite host plant.
That's the real wispy.
It is wispy,
yeah.
Wispy, and then that pink is just beautiful.
It's really beautiful, yeah. All right, Mary.
Well, I'm going to pick something a bit more everyday, and that's our milkweeds for our monarchs. As most people who know me know that I love to grow different kinds of milkweed, and I think we're going to talk about it in more detail later. But any of them, especially the native milkweeds, I love to have them in my yard and watch them get just totally defoliated. But then they just spring right back up. That's my favorite. Julie?
All right, cool. Julie?
Well, I think this year or the last couple of years, fennel has been my favorite. I grow a lot of herbs in my landscape. To be honest, I don't eat fennel on anything at all. I grow it pretty much because I can't kill it and the butterflies like it. So that's probably my favorite host plant right now.
And I will add, I really like pentas. You know, pentas usually attract as a nectar plant for butterflies, but they also bring a whole lot of other pollinators, you know, visit the flowers as well. And again, just like Julie, they're pretty hard to kill. Once you have some pentas going, they're usually going to be there, and they're always fun to practice cuttings. You know, they're really easy to take root from cuttings as well. Okay, Julie, the next one is for you. So we've chosen some of our favorite plants. We have Beth's crazy Agalinus, that's very wild looking, and you know, we have these big groupings that we want to bring all these butterflies in. What are some tips to help us, you know, have one of these butterfly gardens, but to keep it from looking overgrown, you know, so that it still looks kind of manicured and planned, so that, you know, our HOAs don't complain at us and that kind of stuff?
You've got to spend 25 hours a week taking care of it.
Oh, no, they don't want to hear that, Julie. Something else. What else is that?
No, you really don't. You know, one of the things that we tend not to do is a lot of times we don't pay attention to the mature size of plants. And we want to have this instant impact. And so we come in and we buy these little plants at the store, and I always kind of compare them to puppies. You know, they're really small and tiny, and you think that they're not going to get much bigger, but then all of a sudden they're huge. So know how big the plants are going to get, allow them enough space. You may have some open areas in the beginning where maybe you need to mulch to help keep the weeds down. But if you give them enough space, and they're just going to fill into that space, and it's going to be a very natural, nice look. Another thing you can do is, you know, depending on if you like the seed heads on plants, you know, just kind of time it where you can go out and do a little bit of trimming if you don't like that dried look. You know, you can shape things into whatever you want by proper pruning practices. Ideally, you would pick plants that have a shape that you like the natural form of, and you don't have to do a whole lot of pruning. But you can go in and you know, prune for shape to some degree on some of your shrubs and trees if it's needed. But most of our perennials have really interesting natural shapes that, if they're put in the right place, are very appealing.
Okay, thank you. And I know Wendy Wilbur, I know in some of the trainings, she's our state master gardener volunteer coordinator. I know some of the things she's talked about are, you know, sometimes it's as easy as adding mulch, right? So defining, making a nice strong edge with just some mulch in front of those wild, crazy looking plants kind of makes people, kind of tricks them into thinking this is a very planned and well organized landscape.
Another thing you can do is share, because a lot of the perennials that we grow will multiply, and they'll actually benefit from being thinned out occasionally. So, you know, sometimes you do need to dig them up and split them and share them with your friends and family.
And Clara, yes, milkweeds are coming up next. So there's Mary, get ready. We got a couple more questions, but Mary had a whole lot of questions to deal with under milkweed category. But next up, oh, actually, it's you again, Mary. So don't, you're still on, Mary. You know, get ready.
Okay.
Is it possible to have a native Florida garden and still attract a lot of butterflies, and especially thinking of monarchs? But you know, are native gardens also good for attracting butterflies?
Well, absolutely. And that's probably one of the best gardens to have for butterflies. Think about it. Our native plants and our native animals and insects have all co-evolved. So they rely upon each other. The plants rely upon the insects and some animals for pollination, and then the butterflies and the bees rely on those same plants for food source. So absolutely, that would be optimum. And I think that we are sharing a link for publications from the University of Florida on native Florida plants. And there's a lot of information on that link.
Yeah, Matt just got that up there. So check that out, folks. That's a good link. And that's right, Mary, just plant natives and the native butterflies will come, right?
Yes.
Beth, this one's for you. Do you have recommendations for good, plants for North Florida that will attract both butterflies and hummingbirds? So you get like a twofer.
Yeah, the good thing about a lot of these plants that attract butterflies, they also attract pollinators, which butterflies are a pollinator, but our native bees and our honeybees. And then they are also very attractive to hummingbirds. So if you kind of think about your year, if you kind of start in your garden, maybe with a red buckeye that's going to have those beautiful tubular flowers. You may move into something, some coral honeysuckle a little bit later. You're going to add some firebush and fire spike into that mix. So we think it's only red flowers, but it's not. Any type of the salvias will do for that very well. Think about a bottle brush tree. So all of these things that have those nice tubular flowers. One of our favorites in the garden this year, we've had a beautiful purple Amistad salvia, and the hummingbirds have loved that plant. It's a really nice salvia that didn't freeze for us, and so the hummingbirds were hitting it early. And then, later in the summer, they're going to go to the cuffias and the fire spike, the cigar flowers, all those things. So you're going to get the whole world of wildlife when you start having a butterfly garden.
Great. Yeah, at the extension office in Leon County, we planted one of the garden beds as a pollinator garden. And, when it came all in, just every morning when you go out there, you can see butterflies, bees, hummingbirds. So it's really great.
And Mark, what was the hummingbird on the other day for you? You had a plant in your garden.
Oh, yeah. So in my yard, a native plant, the beautyberry, so Calicarpa. I think a lot of you are familiar with beautyberry. I was shocked to see hummingbirds going after it because, you think of long tubular red flowers. If you look closely at if you ever noticed the beautyberry flowers, they're pretty small and not very showy. There's a little cluster, a bunch of them in a little cluster, but the hummingbird was going to each of them. And then the aloe as well, soap aloe was another one I had where the hummingbird spent about, 15, 20 seconds at each flower trying to get all that nectar out of there. Well, next, we didn't have a sign to anyone, but I wanted to ask the panelists if they could pick a good container plant. So maybe someone doesn't have a big yard. They want to put some, plants on the patio in containers. Is there a good example of a butterfly attracting plant, either host, larval host or adult nectar plant that would work in a container in a small area? And we'll do it again from west to east, Beth, so you're up first.
Mark, I think you've mentioned it before. Pentas are really nice. It's a beautiful container plant. It gives you that upright look, and then you can have something draping over in that pot. And it loves our heat. It's tough, and you'll have all sorts of pollinators all over it throughout the summer.
Yeah, that's a good one. Mary?
Well, for a container, I would probably stick to nectar plants because if you plant host plants in there, they're going to get all eaten up and defoliated, and your container's not going to look quite as pretty. So you may want to put your host plants someplace else. So anything that has lots of blooms to it. Coreopsis would be good. Coneflowers. I have a big container of coneflowers, all in different colors, and that makes a really good container plant, and it will come back even year after year. So that's one I'd recommend.
That's a good one. Julie?
I like zinnias. They're very easy to grow from seed, and they're just tough plants. They flower all through our hot summers, so that'd probably be a favorite for me.
The butterflies love them. And I think Matt Orwatt, our Washington County agent, put Turk's cat mallow in the comments there. So that would be another good one. That would be one that would grab those hummingbirds as well too. Maybe you might get a hummingbird in the porch.
That's a bigger pot though, maybe.
Bigger pot though, yeah. All right, let's move in. We're doing good on time. You guys are answering these really fast. Great job. Actually, Mary, can I ask you one more on, well, no. We'll move to milkweeds and then we'll come back to these other categories and see how we do. So let's hit some milkweed questions. And Mary, you're the milkweed queen apparently, because a lot of these are for you. Um, so lots of, questions on, maybe what is the best type of milkweed to plant? There was questions on where can you find them? I know there's lots of native milkweeds, but you can't always find those in the nursery trade. So, I mean, if you were to pick a couple milkweed plants that would be the best choice for Florida gardeners, what would some of those be?
Yes, milkweed is a big topic. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background, there's 22 different species of milkweed in the Asclepias family that's vouchered in Florida. There's 14 that have been found in Santa Rosa County. So and that's probably about true throughout the Panhandle. That said, very few of those are commercially available. Some are very rare. It's hard to find them, and in the wild, if they're blooming, you can see them. But if they're not blooming, they just meld in with everything else, and it's hard to pick them out. So what can you plant if you want to plant some native milkweeds? And definitely people are looking to do that. We get inquiries all the time of, what else can I plant than the tropical milkweed? I want to plant something native. We've had a lot of success with growing perennial milkweed, Asclepias perennis. And it's very easy to grow, and you'll find it at native nurseries and some independent nurseries. And believe it or not, I found it at a box store this spring, and it was grown by one of the major perennial growers in South Florida, and it was beautiful. So maybe, that will become more available as time goes on. The only problem is that when you purchase milkweed and you want to sustain those caterpillars, you need to make sure that it hasn't been treated with a systemic insecticide. And, so look for those aphids on your milkweed. And if it has those aphids, then it's probably pretty safe for your caterpillars as well. Another one that's commonly available is Asclepias tuberosa, commonly known as butterfly weed. It has pretty orange flowers, well adapted to garden conditions, and generally pretty available. The third one that I would recommend is Asclepias incarnata, or that pink swamp milkweed. And it grows much taller than the other ones, and it really does make a striking addition to your garden, especially if you have several plants together. They're very pretty.
Now, oh, sorry, it says swamp. Does it need to be in wet soil?
Well, the swamp milkweed and the perennial milkweed, they do naturally occur in swampy areas, even inundated areas. But they can handle regular garden moisture. Yeah, they just can't be, they're just not going to be drought tolerant. The butterfly weed or the tuberosa, that can be on the drier side. And a lot of times you can find them, you can find the seed available and you could start the seed.
Very cool. I think that's great that you saw them in the big box store. That means that, people are asking for this, and even the big nurserymen and the big box stores, they want to cash in on some of that
Yeah.
market as well, right? That's a good thing. So everyone out there, go buy some native milkweeds, and that'll help encourage more to be found at other outlets. So
Yeah.
that's great. Beth, and I think Mary might have, well, she talked about the different milkweeds, but do you know if there's a milkweed that is most attractive to monarchs that we can grow here in the Panhandle area?
Well, I think Mary covered those. Mary has kind of said from her information, she's found perennis, Asclepias perennis, the swamp, to be really attractive. But really, these natives are going to be found. And it's so surprising. You go out and you plant it and you start this little plant and you go back and where'd it go? And you're so worried, it's gone. And then, you know, the caterpillars have eaten it down and here they come back up. So really the most attractive ones are going to be those natives. We really want to move away from some of that tropical if we can, once we start finding these natives. But, you know, we're still growing tropical. You're going to learn some practices to do with that tropical in a little bit. But master gardeners are even trying to propagate these natives and offer them when we can offer plant sales. So you'll find those in all of our counties coming up soon too, to support your volunteer groups.
Yeah, we have one of our master gardener volunteers, Jean. She's even had to rope her husband into this because she propagates by seed of native milkweeds for our plant sale. But the monarchs find her little germinating plants and want to eat them all up before it's plant sale day. So her amazing husband had to build her first a small shade house, then a bigger shade house, and all the things in between to keep those monarchs from finding her plants. So it's been pretty funny.
That was her plan all along.
Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. She seemed to be surprised and a little bit anxious when it was, getting close to plant sale time and all the milkweeds were getting chomped down. I was going to ask Julie. So folks are asking, they have plenty of milkweeds in their landscape, but they haven't seen any monarchs. And they're wondering, could this have something to do with spraying for mosquitoes?
So that's an interesting question. And wasn't really sure on if they're talking about the mosquito control district, which is, your county organization where they're actually spraying for mosquitoes as a public health entity, or if they mean commercial. So I'm going to kind of cover both just briefly. Your mosquito control district, where it's a county or city, or there are some independent board also mosquito control districts in the state. They are very, very closely regulated by the state as far as where they spray, what they spray. They're required to keep records, do surveillance. There may be some times when they spray because there isn't a large event that's going to occur, but normally they're only spraying in areas where they have done trapping and they know that the population is high enough. And they're held to that. They also, when they do an insecticide that's targeting adults, that is where you're going to have your evening or your after the sun sets, that is applied as an ultra low volume application in a fog that is targeting the adult mosquitoes. A great deal of what the mosquito control district does is public education and larviciding, which is targeting the mosquito larvae that are in an aquatic state. And so that's not something that's going to really impact the butterflies. And your butterflies are going to be active during the day. So even when they are putting out an insecticide, it's at a time that the butterflies and your bees and most of your pollinators are not very active. So in order to try to target the mosquitoes that were worried about transmitting diseases and making it kind of unbearable, typically just the timing of application, the method of application, and the fact that they really can only do it as a need has been identified, minimizes the risk to target organisms. Or non-targets, which would be our butterflies and our pollinators. one thing that we see that we are concerned about is when we take it upon ourselves to try to target adult mosquitoes in our landscapes. For one, that's really, really difficult because a lot of the systems that we see are mist systems that are set up on a timer. And so you have a system that is putting an insecticide out into the landscape on a timed basis. And you don't know if that's when a mosquito is flying by. You don't know what is flying by when that insecticide is put out. So it's not really an exact science. It doesn't really follow our integrated pest management strategies that we like to follow, which is, identify the pest and, apply in a way that's going to minimize impact to non-target organisms. So could those impact butterflies? Possibly, because if those are going off at the time that butterflies are active, then sure, they could definitely be impacted by that. We also have concerns about some of the products used. If we're overusing a certain class of insecticide, then we can build up resistance in lots of insects, but notably in mosquitoes. And we're really concerned about mosquitoes because of their ability to transmit diseases.
Yeah, I think the important thing is there are insecticides that can go after the larvae that can be very selective and only affect the mosquitoes. When you get to the trying to control the adult stage with those fogs, they're more broad spectrum, right? So they can damage butterfly populations. So you want to be careful with that. And I think we've all had calls where, someone has a company come do a fogging in their backyard to control mosquitoes, and all of a sudden they don't see any more butterflies, and what happened, and just knowing that those same insecticides can affect the butterflies, so you want to be careful about that. All right, let's see, Mary, you mentioned, I think Beth, or maybe you mentioned tropical milkweed earlier. So in your opinion, is it okay to plant tropical milkweed? And if so, something about it, do you need to cut it back to the ground? What time of the year do you do that? Why is this an issue?
Well, tropical milkweed is okay. We do prefer that people plant the native milkweeds, but certainly we don't want to have you pull out your tropical milkweed because it can serve those monarch caterpillars. And sometimes they seem to prefer the tropical milkweed. But it does have several drawbacks. One is that when we have some of these winters where we don't get that cold snap and kill it back in November, then that tropical milkweed, just keeps growing. And when it keeps growing, it keeps those monarch caterpillars feeding and reproducing on that milkweed rather than producing that generation that is going to migrate to Mexico and overwinter there. It's some people have thought that, well, but we'll sustain that population that overwinters here, but most of the time we do get those killing frosts later on, and so those monarchs that you have stimulated to overwinter here are going to get killed by that frost, instead of migrate. So it's good to cut down that tropical milkweed to the ground in late fall, probably November. And then, by the time it comes back in the spring, then the monarchs will have returned and can use that as a larval host plant. Also, leaving that milkweed in place also can increase a particular protozoan parasite known as OE on that plant, then the numbers can increase on that plant, and that is, you know, pretty deadly disease for monarch caterpillars. So for both of those reasons, if you do have tropical milkweed, you want to cut it back.
Around Thanksgiving time, late November sometime. Okay, Beth, someone has planted milkweed, been there for about a month, but there's no caterpillars. What is going on?
Where are they? Yeah.
Where are they?
Where are they? It's hard to say exactly why they haven't found your milkweed, but realize these monarchs have these receptors, and it's going to be both visual and chemical that they're going to pick up this plant. So it may be if your area is new for milkweed and it hasn't been there in the past, they're just finding this host plant elsewhere, and it's just going to take some time for them to find that milkweed in your area. So what you can do is plant more, encourage your neighbors to plant more so that you have a bigger stand of this milkweed for those monarchs to find. So there's nothing you're doing wrong. You're actually doing great things by trying to encourage another habitat for those monarchs to find food and a host plant to raise more young. So sometimes it is, just be patient.
See, Beth just wants you all to buy lots of milkweeds and fool up everyone's yards with wildlife attracting plants. Okay, Mary, another one for you. And I think you mentioned milkweeds before, and a lot of us, if you've grown milkweed, tropical milkweed, native milkweed, you often see a whole lot of aphids on them. What should you do? Should you control those aphids? Do you leave them alone? What's your recommendation, Mary?
Well, yes, I think, you know, they're ubiquitous to milkweed. If you have milkweed, you have aphids. Those are those yellow, orange oleander aphids. And I think we're going to post something on there, on the chat about them. I leave them alone. And for several reasons. One is those aphids, once they build up their populations, they bring in the predators that feed on them. So you'll see ladybug larvae, adult ladybugs, big-eyed bugs. You'll see assassin bugs come and feed on them. Our native anoles, some people call them lizards, they'll come and feed on them, and you know, they'll clean them up pretty well. And another really interesting parasitoid that likes to feed on those aphids is this little wasp, and it lays its egg on the aphid. And then that larva of that parasite or parasitoid changes the appearance of that aphid. So if you see one that's kind of rounder and is turning brown or tan color, it's been parasitized. And it's not really doing anything. It's not eating or feeding at that point. It's just serving as a host for that little wasp. And then eventually the wasp will make a hole in the top of that aphid mummy, what we call it, and exit, and then mate and lay more eggs on other aphids. So they help take care of those populations as well. But I leave the aphids and let the predators eventually take care of them. If you start trying to treat them, even with soaps or oils, you can wash away some of the monarch eggs or the small caterpillars that you may not even notice on the plants. And so I don't advocate for treating those unless you're in a contained environment like a greenhouse where you know there's no monarchs laying eggs on your plants. You know, then you could wash them with a soap or treat them with a horticultural oil.
Okay, great answer. Thank you, Mary. It is 1:54, so we're getting close. Let's see, Matt Lawler, do you want to post another link to the survey? So they'll have that survey close down on the chat. I'm going to move away from some of the milkweed questions and to some of the miscellaneous questions we got. And Beth, this one is for you. It has to do with passion vine. So what variety of passion vine, you know, is there one that attracts a particular butterfly, or, you know, also asking about also producing an edible fruit? So can we get another twofer?
Yeah, we do. Passion, and this is a good vine to attract your butterflies. So if you do have some limited space, you may think about growing this vine that has this gorgeous flower, very interesting, you know, flower, that purple kind of white, and also is going to be a host plant for the fritillaries and the zebra longwing. Zebra longwing, we didn't have this when I first came to Florida years ago, and now we have it established pretty well up here in North Florida. So our state butterfly is here. So that's nice to have with the passion vine. So if you want some edible fruit too, so you want something for yourself other than just enjoying this for the butterflies, there are two. Incarnata, which is a common one we grow, that's the maypop that forms the fruit. Some people are going to differ on how tasty that is. So let those ripen on your vine. Another one is the Passiflora edulis. That's really the one you're growing for the fruit. So you may have to really look around or look online to get that specific selection if you're growing passion vine for your own edible fruit use.
Good, and I'll add, if you do plant passion vine, it seems to spread really well by little runners. So what we did at the extension office, and so far so good, it's been there a couple of years, we, you know, this isn't usually what we recommend, but we buried a really big pot in the ground and then planted our passion flower in that pot. You can't tell there's a pot there when you look at it, but that's to try to control the runners moving all over the garden. And so far so good. We'll see how it works. Now this one, Julie, we kind of talked about moths, Julie, but the question was, should we allow cabbage moths to remain on the broccoli plants? Do we want to encourage other diversity of pollinators?
That depends. So the cabbage moth, it doesn't just affect cabbage. Obviously, if it's on broccoli, it's a lot of different plants that are in the cole family. So, or, you know, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage. If you leave them there and they pupate in the soil, then when you plant your fall garden, you'll have them again. So that depends. Do you want to support moths, or do you want to have a garden where you have something to eat from it? So kind of a personal choice there. But if you leave them now, you're creating a nursery environment and you'll continue to support them.
Okay, good answer. All right, about 3 minutes left. Let's see. I'm going to go back and let's see what we have here for in the butterfly group. Okay, Beth, question for you. Are there colors of blooms or colors of foliage that attract butterflies better than others?
They're going to go to a wide variety of foliage and colors. Remember, it's chemical cues, and it's also some visual cues. Insects are going to see very different things than we see. So a lot of times if you put a different light spectrum on some of these flowers, they actually have landing pads that are saying, come here, bullseye, you want to come here and feed. And that's what a lot of these insects see. But there's also chemicals that they pick up for far away, that it's going to bring them in, and chemicals that they get when they're closer to that plant. So really, we've said, I think Mary and Julie have both said this, a diverse group of flowers and colors, and not only flowering plants, but think of some of those plants like wax myrtle, you know, Duhun holly, yucca, all of those are also host plants for a lot of our butterflies that will bring them in. So a good diversity, you're going to really just increase the number of things you see in your yard.
Very cool. Yeah, I just read something about, they looked at what colors hummingbirds see, and they're on a whole other spectrum of light than we are, and they see much different colors than we do. So, Julie, another question for you. So folks, we're at about 2 o'clock, or well, 2 o'clock Eastern time, 1 o'clock Central. We didn't really go for 2 hours, Julie and Beth and Mary. We have a couple more questions here. Again, I think Matt just shared the link. So if folks need to take off, please at least hit the link there and take the survey. But we have a couple more questions. If the folks are interested in hanging on for a little bit, we'll keep answering a couple more of these questions. And feel free also to, if there's a question we haven't hit upon, if you want to put that in the chat box, we'll help that out. And actually, Mary, Clara asked, is there a list of butterfly or moth books? I know you wanted to kind of give a shout out to the IFAS bookstore. So is there a list somewhere, or how would they go about finding some good butterfly books?
Yes, the University of Florida IFAS Extension has a great bookstore in Gainesville, but they offer, of course, online service. And I did have a link that, yes, I think Matt Lawler just put it online, a link to all those resources. And there's some wonderful ones there that will get you started on identifying butterflies. There's a really nice little field guide to butterfly gardening. So there's a lot of good stuff there.
Very cool. Also want to remind folks that it might be taking off. 2 weeks is prepping for your fall vegetable garden. So try to join us then. Okay, let's see. Julie, are there any specific butterflies that we should try to target to help them out? You know, are they endangered, or are they threatened in different ways? And are there, you know, some of these butterflies maybe that we should try to prioritize over others?
I don't know that there are any in this area of the state that are particularly like listed as endangered. I know there are some down in the southern portion that are endangered or imperiled. They've really been trying to build the populations back up. I think really just sticking with that, offer a lot of diversity, and, you know, responsible insecticide use is going to be the best method for anybody. Beth or Mary, do you know of any that are common in our area that are endangered or imperiled?
I don't, but I think, you know, the biggest issue for butterflies is loss of habitat. You know, we're losing these natural areas. So in your own neighborhoods, you know, think about making it a neighborhood approach instead of just your yard if you can. And, you know, even if you pass a container plant onto a neighbor that kind of has more of a sterile type yard, that's something. And maybe that'll encourage them to get the butterfly bug and plant more.
Great.
Yes, and I would like to add too that there are lots of butterflies that are not big and beautiful, like the monarchs and the swallowtails and some of the others. But there are a lot of very small ones that are not as brightly colored and not as visible. So keep a lookout for those in your garden, and keep in mind that yes, a diverse landscape and very limited insecticide use will encourage all of them.
So not just focus on the charismatic ones, right? Think of all the ugly ducklings as well, and the small ones. Beth, butterfly houses and I was going to ask Mary this one because I know Mary is all about the butterfly house, but I think what they're talking about maybe are some of the DIY little nest structures or things people build. Are those really effective at attracting them? Where should you put them? Do you know much about those kind of homemade butterfly habitat structures?
Right. Mary's butterfly house is definitely needed. plus for butterflies. So the butterfly house that's moving to Milton, yes, we want that one. But your kind of backyard little structure that's a small wooden structure with some slats and it opens in the back, it's really going to be more decorative in your garden. There may be, butterflies could use that as a shelter sometimes if you don't have other trees or shrubs around, or they may climb off a host plant and put their chrysalis there. So you may use it as that. I wouldn't discourage anyone from putting one in, but don't think it's going to, you're going to open the door and you're just going to have a casing of butterflies all in it. But we do have a link if anyone kind of wants to enhance their garden with that different feature. You can build one yourself just as a beautiful enhancement for your butterfly area.
Very nice. Okay, here's a fun one. Let's have give us maybe two of you answer, the best native plant for full sun to attract butterflies. A native plant, full sun, attracts butterflies. What you got?
Which one?
Let's go with Mary first. He's the butterfly queen.
For full sun that attract butterflies, nectar plants, black-eyed Susan, coneflowers, coreopsis, blanket flower. There's all kinds of them. But don't only think annuals and perennials. As Beth said, think about those trees like Tahoon holly. That blooms early in the spring and the bees and the butterflies are all over that. And it's a host plant.
Beth, how about you give us a shrub for the full sun that attracts butterflies? I think we just mentioned some of them, but give us another one. Yeah.
Another one would be saltbush or baccharis. That is a wonderful one that's that haze of kind of pale yellow white in the fall, and the monarchs and fritillaries are all over it. Good plant, good tough plant you can actually use in your landscape as a screen. Plus beautiful color and just loaded with butterflies in the fall.
That's right. The St. Mark's Wildlife Refuge has a Monarch Fest every year in the fall. And when you go there, the monarchs are hanging in like droves off of the saltbush next to the coast there. It's pretty amazing to see. All right, now how about some butterfly plants for the shade? That might be a little bit trickier.
Start with
Mary.
Julie.
They want time to get their thoughts together. I was going to go with Butterfly Queen Mary. What you got, Mary? Butterfly plant for the shade.
Well, there are some nectar plants for the shade I can think of offhand. Our native azaleas, the Florida anise, sweet spire, fire spike. I think also will do fine in the shade, and that's, I think, one that Beth had mentioned earlier when we were talking about what also attracts hummingbirds.
Oh, that was easy, huh, Mary?
There's a few. I think also pawpaw can
that would be a good one.
do well in the shade, and that's a larval host plant.
Julie, you got any to add? On the spot like that?
I think the passion flower vine will take a certain amount of shade also. And a lot of our plants will take some part shade. When we get into deep shade, it may be a little bit more challenging. I know there are a lot of gingers that do well in the shade, and I haven't really paid attention to if they attract butterflies, but I would guess that they would, especially since there's such a variety of flower colors and shapes on those plants.
I'm going to try to address a Facebook question. And maybe Beth, could you try to take this one? Is there a variety or species of passion flower that is, what's the question? That is bad, that is not good for the Gulf fritillary?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, I know some are not as attractive. We've had one called the Passiflora vitifolia that really just, that you found them flying around it. You didn't find the caterpillars eating that particular one. It wasn't as desirable, but I'm not sure if it's bad for any of them, if it would be a negative to grow. You just may not have some that are going to be the best host like some of the other species. Mary or Julie, you know of one?
No, I think I see no's. Julie, I think this was either a Zoom question or a Facebook question that just came in, but it was regarding mosquito spraying again. And are the home services, like the pest control operators or pest control companies that a homeowner could hire, are they regulated similarly to like the municipal mosquito control, that type
It's
of level?
different.
It's a little different. Okay. Yeah,
Right. So anybody who's applying pesticides in the state of Florida for hire must have the proper licensing, and they are regulated by the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. However, they are not required to submit data in the same manner that the mosquito control districts are. So yes, there is some regulation. Is it to the same degree or standard that a mosquito control district is? It's really not comparing apples to apples. So they must be licensed with the proper category. There is a regulatory agency, but they don't have to perform surveillance ahead of time the way that mosquito control districts do. Yeah,
they will, if you hire a pest control company to come and, fog your yard for adult mosquitoes, just to know that they are following the law, but they're using a product that could be harmful to the butterflies, but they're still in compliance with all regulations. Just know that you cannot have mosquito adults controlled without potentially harming, other insects, including butterflies. Let's see. Oh, do you all want to give a unconventional favorite butterfly attractor? And I will start and let you guys think of one. So the Aristolochia, the pipe vines. So Aristolochia is not a vine that you see a whole lot of folks growing. Dutchman's pipe, I think, is another common name for some of the Aristolochias. But we do have a native Aristolochia that attracts the pipevine swallowtail, and that's a neat plant. It's got a very funky looking flower, and just not a lot of people grow it. So that would be my unusual butterfly plant. Beth, you want to provide a kind of a weirdo butterfly attractor?
I don't know if it's unusual. It's pretty common. It's called Toadflax. It's a wintertime, cool season wildflower. Remember, wildflower, not weed. Very delicate in its look, rosette leaves, and then sends up a spike and a teeny tiny flower. But if you look closely during that winter time, you are going to see the kind of black spiny buckeye larva on that. And so that's, I'm kind of that interested. What can you see? I really notice what's in nature. And so look closely under Toadflax or Linaria.
Thank you, Beth. Mary?
Well, something, a plant that most people don't think of as a larval host plant would be sweet bay magnolia. It's a huge, big tree, and it's got those beautiful white flowers, very lemony, sweet smell, and great tree. But it's also host to actually several species, but also the eastern tiger swallowtail, but several moths. I think there's a sweet bay moth that feeds on it. So I think that's kind of a neat one. Most of us think of the small plants, the perennials and such, but even trees can be larval host plants.
I was just distracted by a zebra longwings that went by the window. Julie, do you have a favorite, not so common butterfly attracting plant?
Yeah, I've kind of discovered one. Well, I didn't discover it. I got introduced to it by my master gardeners, and that's frog fruit. It's a ground cover that is also a host to the Buckeye butterfly. And it's really, it's very dainty, very low growing, has little flowers. And so we do get some nectar draw also. And it's kind of a nice plant for really tough areas because it takes where it floods and some dry areas too. I've seen it growing across asphalt and in flooded spots. So that's a neat one.
I got a really good picture of it in the median of one of our big, roadways here that's growing wild. Yeah, and it's got one of the coolest common names, turkey tangle fog fruit, right? That's the same thing. Phylum. Yeah, it's got a really cool common name. There was a question that came up from up here for me. Where can I purchase a butterfly house in Leon County? So I think there are plans where you can make your own. If you wanted to purchase one, the places I would probably go are some of our local nurseries. So, the big ones would be Native Nurseries, Esposito's, and Tallahassee Nurseries. They may have some in their shop areas that may sell those like as a kit or something. I don't think I've ever seen one put together that you can buy right out of the store, but it might be a kit they offer. And if they don't have it, the good thing about the local nurseries is you can ask them maybe to source it and maybe have some bring in the store because other people might want it too. Let's see. Oh, Matt Orwatt wanted to share that his favorite unconventional butterfly attracting plant is the toothache tree.
Oh,
so, yeah. We just got another question in. Let me read this question here. Oh, this has to do with mosquito spraying again. Yeah, fogging. You do definitely need to be careful with fogging, and when you're buying those milkweeds, to be careful that you don't purchase ones like Mary said that already have an insecticide applied to them.
Hey, Mark, really the point for all that we do is really to identify your problem first. Make sure that's like in mosquitoes, you're identifying and seeing if there is enough pressure there to take action. And then if a chemical is the action you take, there's many other things that people can do. So that's really kind of Extension's motto there, is to make sure you identify first.
Very good. I think we're at 2:15, so I think we might, and Beth has the last word there that, IPM, integrated pest management, identify your pest first and then figure out how to control it. Panelists, you did a fantastic job. Thanks to the panelists, Julie, Mary, and Beth. Great job. Matt Lawler, thank you, Matt Lawler, for all your copying and pasting and keeping up with things. And also Matt Orwatt, thank you as well. And there again, thank you, Matt. The survey, folks, that are, we're going to be taking off, but there in the chat is the survey. Please let us know if you learned anything, if you have any feedback to help us out. And we very much appreciate you joining us for our Gardening in the Panhandle Live. So I think that's it. Bye, everyone.